Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to my review of tonight's edition of Smackdown. And tonight's Smackdown was held from the American Bank Center in Corpus Christi, Texas. And tonight's Smackdown, I thought it was better than Raw, but to me Smackdown was an average show tonight. Like the first hour wasn't really that great. The second hour was really decent. So to me, it was just SmackDown was just an average show to me. So the show opened up tonight with Carmella coming out. You know, she's asking the crowd to applaud her as as their SmackDown Women's Champion. The crowd ends up booing her. Carmella says, tonight is not about her. It's about Asuka. And, Carmella says, this is the real Asuka, because she then shows a clip of when, Asuka's undefeated streak came to an end, where it shows a clip of, when Charlotte ended up beating Asuka at WrestleMania, and how, Mandy took out Asuka last week, but Asuka won the match last week against Mandy. And Carmella ends up saying, Asuka's loss at WrestleMania shattered Asuka, and she hasn't been good since. And Carmella says she's not afraid of Asuka. And she goes on to say that the edge of Asuka is over. And, she's saying to the crowd, that everyone is ready for Asuka. She's like, oh, you're ready for Asuka. You're ready for Asuka. Pretty much basically Carmella was doing that. Asuka ends up coming out, gets in the ring, with Carmella. And Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville end up coming out. Mandy says, Asuka is a shadow of her former self, and that she was a second away from beating Asuka, last week. She goes on to say that she can beat Asuka tonight. Sonya Deville says, Mandy left enough of Asuka for her, and that, tonight it's her turn to take on Asuka. And so Carmella ends up telling Asuka to get out of here, to get out of the ring. And Paige ends up coming out and says no one speaks for her, and that she makes the matches around here. She ends up telling Asuka, who does she want to face, either Sonya or Mandy. Asuka ends up grabbing the mic from Carmella, and Asuka says she wants to challenge both Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. And so Paige then makes the match official. It was Asuka versus Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville handicap match. And so the match happened after when SmackDown came back from commercial. And so the match got underway. Asuka versus Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. Handicap match. The match itself, it was a typical women's match. Wasn't that great of a match. Carmella was on commentary throughout this match. Mandy Rose has been, getting pretty decent in the ring. This, you could tell, they just put, Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville in this match so Asuka, could end up, looking, strong going into her match at Money in the Bank. And, Asuka won the match. She ended up putting Sonya Deville in the Asuka lock. Sonya ended up tapping out. So then you had, after the match, Asuka ends up taking down Mandy Rose. Carmella then, ends up ends up taking down Asuka, and pretty much that basically was what happened after the match. But like I said, the match itself wasn't that great of a match. It was your typical women's match. Then after that, we had Miz backstage. A guy approaches him with a platter full of pancakes, and then that's when the New Day arrives. Xavier Woods apologizes to Miz because they have been jerks to Miz. Kofi Kingston says Miz gave them a reality check, and that Miz gave them the hard truth last week. And Xavier wanted Miz to choose which member of the New Day will be in the Money in the Bank match. They had like these strips of paper in a hat, and so they end up saying Miz has to not look and choose which member of the New Day will get to be in Money in the Bank. And so they end up pulling down the band that Miz was wearing, and they end up switching the hats. And one of the hats is revealed to have pancake batter in it, and Miz ends up putting his hand in it, and then Miz gets all pissed off, at that they joked around, that the New Day joked around with Miz once again. And he says to the New Day that he can't wait for Samoa Joe, Rusev, and also him to beat them tonight, to beat New Day tonight. But it was a funny backstage segment with Miz and the New Day. Next match was Karl Anderson versus Harper. This match, it was pretty short, basically a nothing match. Karl Anderson ended up getting the win with the schoolboy roll up on Harper, and it was really shocking. I would have thought Harper was going to win this match, but Karl Anderson ended up pulling off a shock and defeating Harper. So, but yeah, it was pretty much a short match. It was pretty much a nothing match. Then we had Naomi and Jimmy backstage. Naomi and Jimmy Uso backstage. Naomi was talking crap to Lana, saying that after she snatches Lana balls, she is going to go to snap that Money in the Bank briefcase, the contract. And Jimmy ends up saying to Rusev Day, meaning Aiden English and Lana, because this is going to be a mixed tag team match, which happens next. And so Jimmy Uso says to Rusev Day that they're going to find out who the best couple on SmackDown Live is. And they say, "Welcome to the Uso Penitentiary." And so they end up walking off. SmackDown goes to commercial, comes back, from the commercial. Then we have, the mixed tag team match, Naomi and Jimmy Uso versus Aiden English and Lana. This match, it was okay. It wasn't great. Wasn't that great of a match though. But Naomi and Jimmy were decent in the match. Aiden English, he got a lot of Rusev Day cheers, before the match even started. There were some people in the crowd, when Aiden was in the ring, they were, chanting, some of them were chanting Rusev Day. But Naomi and Jimmy got the win. Jimmy ended up hitting a super kick on Aiden English to score the win for him and Naomi. So all in all, the match itself, it was okay, but wasn't that great of a match. Then after that, we had the Money in the Bank contract signing between AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. Paige was there also. So Styles ends up making a statement that he thinks he's been in a war with Nakamura forever. And he ends up going to say to Nakamura that he knows straight up that Nakamura can't beat him, with his low blows and his no speak English, saying. And Styles says, at Money in the Bank, he's still gonna walk out as the WWE champion. So Styles ends up signing the contract. He then passes it to Nakamura. Nakamura then, examines the pen, and he says, "It's out of ink." He ends up throwing the pen, and Styles gets really mad about that. Styles gets really mad, and he says to Nakamura to stand up like a man, and he's tired of these games that Nakamura's, playing. He ends up slapping Nakamura. And we see Nakamura, he retrieves a pen, I guess from his pocket, signs it, then he says, to end the segment, he goes, "Last man standing." And that pretty much ended the Money in the Bank contract signing. But it was a decent contract signing, just a normal sit down. Didn't go on forever. So, and then we had Becky Lynch versus Charlotte. This match was a decent match. It was a really enjoyable match between these two. Both these two really good friends, doing the whole tea thing, which is funny. But both Becky and Charlotte, they put on a really good, decent match. Very, very enjoyable match between them both. Becky Lynch ended up getting the win because she locked in the disarmer on Charlotte, and Charlotte ended up tapping out. And after the match, both of them ended up hugging it out, which was really cool. It was really nice. So, but both Becky and Charlotte, they gave it all they had. It was a great entertaining match between the both of them. It was very enjoyable. Then we had after that we had Samoa Joe getting interviewed, and Joe says, last week he would put he put Daniel Bryan to sleep, and out of Money in the Bank, and he he did what he said, and it was just a decent interview with Joe. Then we had Renee Young bringing out, introducing Big Cass. She was going to interview him about him facing Daniel Bryan at Money in the Bank. Big Cass said that years ago when he was still in NXT, he was backstage at WrestleMania 30. And, he walked behind Daniel Bryan. And he goes on to say as he walked behind him, was this, he ends up calling Daniel Bryan, a pathetic guy, back then, saying that, this pathetic guy is the WWE champion. And he goes on to say that night, Daniel Bryan's victory was a fluke. And he goes on to say that, a good man always defeats a little man. Then he then shows a clip of when Joe made Daniel Bryan pass out last week. And then, when Big Cass big booted Daniel after the match. And Big Cass says that, Daniel Bryan has never been in the ring as big as him, and as educated as him. And he says he guarantees that, Daniel has never been in the ring with someone, who has a grudge as, he does, as Big Cass does. And Big Cass goes on to say that Money in the Bank, he is going to beat down Daniel Bryan, and he's going to make sure that, Daniel would not lock him in the heel lock. And he goes on to say that at Money in the Bank, Daniel Bryan is going to be beaten and battered, and that he will never survive in this big man's world. So that was pretty much the interview. But it was decent. It was a decent interview with Big Cass. Him going into Money in the Bank facing Daniel Bryan. He gave a pretty decent interview. So then we had Dasha Fuentes, I think it was, interviews Sin Cara about last week with Andrade Cien Almas and Zelina Vega. Sin Cara says he knew Andrade since he was 14, and he said something happened with him. And Zelina Vega comes in and says something happened about him, but Zelina says that she is the best thing Andrade has, and that she goes on to say that Sin Cara made Andrade look weak because Sin Cara made him hide behind a mask. So Zelina says she went to Paige and made a match with Sin Cara next week against Andrade Cien Almas. And then we see just Andrade ends up coming and tosses Sin Cara around, and pretty much that basically ended the interview with Sin Cara. But it's cool. It's cool that we're gonna see Andrade versus Sin Cara next week. We all know that Andrade is gonna win. So then we had the main event, which was the New Day versus Samoa Joe and Rusev. And this match, it was a good main event. It was a really entertaining main event. New Day, very decent in the match. Really enjoyed them in the match. Joe and Rusev, and I forgot to say the Miz was also in the match. Also, they were tagging with with Samoa Joe, and Miz was tagging with Samoa Joe and Rusev, and Joe and Rusev and Miz, they were decent in the match. You had at one point, at the end of the match, Miz ends up taking the pancakes, and he accidentally throws the plate of pancakes at Rusev and Joe. Rusev, Rusev and Joe didn't like that, with Miz throwing the pancakes accidentally at them. And so we just see Rusev Machka kicks Miz, and then Joe delivers a senton on Miz. And they gave the opportunity for New Day end up hitting the midnight hour on Miz to score the win. And so New Day ends up getting the win to pretty much end SmackDown tonight. But it was a good main event between these guys. It was a really enjoyable main event. So yes, anyways, that's it for this review of tonight's edition of SmackDown. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and until next video, I'll see you all later.